नमस्कार। भारत स्पीक्स विद टीम न्यूज़ आवर में आपका बहुत-बहुत स्वागत है। आज हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं विवेक जी, मेरे को-होस्ट और साउथ से तमिलनाडु से हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं श्रीनिवासन जी, बीआर श्रीनिवासन जी। ही इज़ अ वेरी एक्टिव पॉलिटिकल कमेंटेटर, एनालिस्ट और आज का जो टॉपिक रहेगा वो है अभी गृह मंत्री जी ने जो हिंदी का ज़िक्र किया था टू हैव हिंदी एज़ अ थर्ड लैंग्वेज। तो उस पर साउथ में या तमिलनाडु में पर्टिकुलरली और बाकी राज्यों में भी काफ़ी ज़्यादा प्रतिक्रिया आई है जो वहाँ की रीजनल पार्टीज़ हैं उनके द्वारा। किस तरह से लोगों ने लिया है, किस तरह से वहाँ पे ये देखा जा रहा है वहाँ की आम जनता में, इसके बारे में थोड़ी-सी वार्तालाप करेंगे हम श्रीनिवासन जी से। श्रीनिवासन जी, वेलकम।
Namaste. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, yeah, I mean, I would say it's over to you. If you could just brief us on the issue and how it has been taken and in what context it has been taken in
Yeah.
Tamil Nadu and how it affects the overall politics of the region.
Yeah. So this is generally a annual ritual. So generally this happens during around the Hindi Divas Day when the Home Minister or some other minister talks on the Hindi Divas Day promoting Hindi or something good about Hindi, and then it catches fire down south, and then people have debates and on the TV channels regarding Hindi imposition, and there is a Twitter trend for a couple of days on stop Hindi imposition, kind of an hashtag. So generally, it has become an annual ritual. However, this time it is slightly different. That apart from the Hindi Divas Day, there was this official language committee meeting, and then Amit Shah ji had made some remarks, and then that has caught the attention of the regional parties down south. So what I see is that essentially the important or the controversial, so-called controversial remarks has got two parts to it, where he says if people from different states meet up, they should speak in a language of India, one of the languages of India, and Hindi instead of English. And the second part is that will not be promoted at the cost of any local language. So it is clearly conveyed that any regional language or the local language of any particular state is not under any threat. So the recommendation is that if two people, for example, if a Gujarati and a Marathi, they come to Delhi and they meet, the recommendation that Amit Shah ji is making is just talk in Hindi instead of English. And I think that is already an existing practice. If people know Hindi, even if they're from different states, if people know Hindi, they at first sight they talk in Hindi only and not in English. So he has essentially reiterated a practice that is already there. And two, even if they know English, he has told you, even if they are speaking English, so stop doing that and talk in Hindi. And this is just a recommendation. There is no government order. The government is not going to monitor to see whether people are going to talk in English or Hindi. So it's just a recommendation that he is making. Two, if people from the south or people from non-Hindi speaking states are meeting up, say for example, if I and a Malayali meet in Delhi, then obviously if we both don't know Hindi, we are going to talk in English. I'm not going to switch to Hindi, a language that I don't know, just because Amit Shah ji has told. So it essentially does not apply to people who do not know Hindi. So reducing it, it applies to people who know Hindi. And the other part is that if me being a Tamilian come to Delhi, and if there's a Malayali who comes, but I know Malayalam through some learning, and then the recommendation that Amit Shah ji makes is please talk in Malayalam because it's a language of India instead of English. And it can be vice versa also. If a Malayali knows Tamil, me and him can talk in Tamil rather than English. So essentially, this is the recommendation that he is making, that instead of English, converse in Hindi if you both know Hindi, or in a language of India that if we both know that converse in that language. So there is no threat to any local language or regional language like Tamil or Kannada or Malayalam or Bengali or anything. So essentially, this is blown out of proportion. The headlines and all the papers where Amit Shah says people should choose Hindi over English. That's the headline that is there, and hence there is a major hue and cry over it. So that's what I see or how I interpret and understand Amit Shah ji's statement.
Yeah. So, Srinivasan sir, apart from this all politics statement and each and everything coming up, so keep aside, how you see the Hindi? Is it going to be beneficial, or what is the pros and cons among the culture and among the people of Tamil Nadu? How it is like, what is the best part of this Hindi into Tamilians?
So, for in Tamil Nadu per se, how it is different from other states in India is that in Tamil Nadu has a two language formula, essentially in government schools. So, private schools, there are three languages. So, essentially, we are talking about government schools, government run schools having a two language formula. So, in private schools, English is mandatory,
Mhm.
and the second language is either Tamil or Hindi or Sanskrit or French or German, Spanish, accordingly. And there's a third language also. Again, if you choose Tamil in second language, you can choose Hindi as third language. Or if you choose Hindi as second language, you can choose Tamil as third language. So it's vice versa. So two languages are optional in private schools. English is mandatory. When it comes to government school, it is only English and Tamil. So essentially, what it means is that the poor students cannot study Hindi even if they want to. So when people say Hindi should not be imposed, what essentially is happening is only English and Tamil are imposed because in government schools, if for the poor students, people who are rich, people who are well off, people who are middle class, upper middle class, and the elite, when they go to private schools and CBSE schools, they have the option of learning any language that they want because the schools offer. But essentially, schools run by the Tamil Nadu government, which essentially means run by the DMK government or the ADMK government since
Mm.
1967, does not give any option to choose any language for the student. It only imposes English and Tamil.
Tamil. Okay.
Okay. So people who are well off, they are studying Hindi.
Mhm.
The schools run by DMK politicians are CBSE schools. In that schools, there is Hindi offered as second language. So it's basically double standards and hypocrisy practiced by both DMK and ADMK, where the schools run by the DMK members offer Hindi. They allow students who are rich and well off to study Hindi or French or German or Sanskrit also, but they restrict the poor to study only Tamil and English. But what data and facts state is that the Hindi Prachar Sabha exams, the exams conducted by Hindi Prachar Sabha across India, it's students from Tamil Nadu who pass out the maximum year on year.
Okay.
So it essentially says that there is no anti-Hindi sentiment or anti-Hindi fear on ground. If there is fear on
Among people of Tamil Nadu.
among people of Tamil Nadu, among parents, among
Okay.
students. Otherwise, there will not be record number of students passing out from Hindi Pracha Sabha. Why is it even more than Gujarat or Maharashtra? Why is it even more than Kerala or Andhra? It conveys two things. One, people who want to learn Hindi are learning Hindi, which is right. Two, because you're denying in Hindi, people who are having the money are paying and studying Hindi.
Mhm.
So instead, if you had given them Hindi in government schools, they will not even go to Hindi Pracha Sabha.
Mhm.
So what it essentially means is that you who are saying that you are against imposition of Hindi, you're not even giving the option of studying Hindi to government school students. So that is the sentiment is not at all anti-Hindi. DMK leaders know Hindi, ADMK leaders know Hindi, DMK MPs know Hindi. So, and when they campaign in parts of Chennai, which have a large North Indian population, which is in northern Chennai, there are constituencies like Harbour and Egmore, where even North Indian leaders, say Rajasthan chief ministers, Rajasthan politicians, or even say from BJP, Smriti Irani
Mhm.
had campaigned. Usually, people from Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh campaign. So in these areas, DMK campaigns in Hindi. There are odd videos that are going where DMK is talking in Hindi and asking for votes. There are posters appearing in Hindi asking for votes, where people are where there are substantial Hindi population. So this is clear double standards. This is clear hypocrisy. So there is no anti-Hindi sentiment on ground. There is no Hindi hatred on ground. It is only created by politicians for political gain, and there is a history to it.
So, can we say among this, things are going up? Can we say that Hindi can destroy the politics of Tamil Nadu for in between DMK and AIDMK?
When you mean destroy, what do you mean?
Destroy means if Hindi is introduced, then can, like, as of now they are playing anti North India, anti introducing of Hindi. Okay, like you said, the school things are going on. Like the government schools are only with the Tamil and English. and private schools are. So can we say that it can destroy the politics of these
So,
people?
so
These
what
people.
you can expect or not expect is you cannot expect either of these two parties to introduce Hindi. So, because the
Okay.
education is a concurrent list, and the new education policy also says that it's up to the states to decide on the language formula. So, you cannot expect DMK or ADMK to introduce it. For if at all it has to be introduced as an option and not as an imposition, you need to have a nationalist party on in the ruling the state. But even if the nationalist parties rule the state, if DMK and ADMK are still relatively strong, they can create riots, they can create violence as they did in 30s and 60s. So what has to happen, or what happened, and then what is the learning from that is that the politics of Dravidian parties was essentially constructed in a manner which did not allow this. So like how the freedom fighters uh, in the pre-independence India saw English as a representation of British and hence opposed English and hence promoted Hindi or the regional languages, hence started papers in the regional languages in Hindi, including Mahatma Gandhi. That's why Mahatma Gandhi said Hindi should replace English, because Mahatma Gandhi and the Congress party at that time and the other freedom fighters saw English as a representation of the British crown and the British. Like how they hated the English clothing, like how they hated the English food, like how they hated the English culture, they hated the language also. So what the DMK did after its formation in 1949, probably it took cue, but the DMK's precursor, which was the Justice Party during the pre-independence India, even then in 1930s, when Rajaji Rajagopalachari was a chief minister in 1937, when he tried to introduce Hindi, the same anti-Hindi agitation took place in Madras presidency at that time. However, the Justice Party leaders knew Hindi, they knew Sanskrit, they knew Tamil. They learned and they were all scholars. But they opposed Hindi in 1937 for the sake of politics. Cut to 1949. What happens after DMK's formation? They took Q, the same Q, and their politics was essentially constructed on anti-Brahmin, Aryan Dravidian racial theory, hence anti-Aryan, hence anti-North Indian, hence anti-Hindi. Since Hindi was a representation of North India, they opposed Hindi, and hence when the Constitution 15 years period was over in 1962, when the Congress government wanted to take Hindi to non-Hindi speaking states, riots and violence broke out in Tamil Nadu, and they emerged victorious in the following assembly elections. There were a lot of factors, but this anti-Hindi agitation was one of the factors that contributed to the electoral victory. And since they saw success through this, they are holding on to it. So there is history to it, and as long as the overwhelming majority are going to be silent, as we see in every protest, if the good people are going to be silent, if the minority population, minuscule population is going to make a lot of noise, and that is only going to be heard, and people will think that is the overwhelming sentiment on ground, and hence no party is able to take the decision to introduce or give an option of Hindi for the government school students. So in all private schools, Hindi is being taught, Hindi is being studied. In Hindi Pracha Sabha, Hindi is being taught, Hindi is being studied. Only in the government schools, Hindi is not there. And that will really take some strong leader to emerge in Tamil Nadu and then introduce Hindi in government schools. And people, if they don't see any benefit, they are not going to study. The sheer fact that so many students are studying Hindi shows that they see benefit in studying Hindi.
Okay. So, as per politically, we can say that Amit Shah's statement can make some benefit uh, uh, among the Tamil Nadu people or Tamil Nadu state, according to politics. I'm telling you for the BJP. So, can you say that it can make up some benefit for them, or
So it,
how
it,
they
it,
are
it,
looking into?
it depends on how the local party and the party leaders are taking the see. People are also fed up, okay, because they have seen this from 1937, they have seen this in 1960s, they are seeing it every year. They are so the people are who are more and more educated and who have a view to what is happening around. They
Mhm.
know that this is hypocrisy and double standards. So they all understand that what is being done is pure denial of a basic right to a poor student. So if the local party takes this message across that you are giving the option to study Hindi to private school students, you're giving the option to study Hindi to matriculation and CBSE school students, Why don't you give that opportunity to or an option to that poor student? If he doesn't select, he or she doesn't select, no problem. You give an option and see whether the person down south in Madurai or Tiruchi or Ramanathapuram or Kanyakumari or Pollachi, they want to study Hindi or not. How will you know what is the data for you to say that people don't want Hindi? It's an
So, so,
assumption.
so private schools are following the Tamil Nadu board, or they are following the CBSE board, like how it is.
There are both. There is CBSE school, there are CBSE
Okay.
schools, and there are state board schools.
Okay.
Even in state board schools, Hindi is there. That is the
Okay.
whole point. That's the larger point.
Oh.
Even in
Oh.
matriculation schools or even in state board schools, in private schools. I mean, in private schools,
Okay.
there is Hindi. Only for government-run schools, there is Hindi is not there.
Okay.
That is the point. That is the problem. Only for the languages are denied only to the poor students.
So, how it is going to be beneficial for the BJP? This is a statement.
Beneficial for the BJP. See, politically, there is a week is too long in politics. And as I say that this is an annual ritual, 1 or 2 days it will happen, and then people forget it and go. So essentially, what it means is that it is good for that an hour of TV debate, and people don't see any threat per se to the language. So how it will be beneficial to the BJP is that BJP should take this message across. If they take this message across, it will be beneficial to them. They need to take this message that why can't poor students study an additional language? So that is what they need to take. If they are okay with English being mandatory, why are they not okay with Hindi being given as an option? So if this message is taken by the BJP, it will benefit BJP because it will make people aware. People have been fooled for generations, and they are okay with the language, an alien language that has been imposed on them, and they are being fed up a fear that Hindi, which is a language of one of the languages in the country, which is not even being imposed, they are being fed say no to it even being an option. That is where the difference is. So BJP in the state needs to take the message across that we are not for imposition, we are not making it mandatory, we are not forcing anybody to study Hindi. All we are saying is give it as an option to the poor student. Somebody who's earning a lakh in that family can afford to make their child study Hindi. If somebody is earning only 5,000 or 10,000, why are you denying an opportunity? So this is clear economic bias. So this is the message that BJP needs to take across, and they will benefit from it.
Exactly, sir. I think that's what we also discussed. That I mean, we are having this conversation in English. That itself is an irony. But we are not harming Tamil in any way. I mean, it's not we are denigrating Tamil. Apart from that, I mean, we have seen how PM himself, wherever he goes for rallies, for different events, I mean, he always try to speak in the local language. I think it happened in Kanyakumari also when he went there in Chennai, in Kerala.
Forget that. So the Prime Minister
So, I
talks
mean,
about Tamil in the UN. Prime
yes,
Minister talks about Tiruvalluvar and Tirukural everywhere abroad.
absolutely,
He talks
absolutely.
about Tamil being the oldest language in the world. So
Yeah,
this is and BJP stands for diversity. So the talk about unity and diversity is gone. The talk today is diversity in unity. Promoting, protecting, and preserving diversity in unity is what is the motto. So that is
indeed,
what is
indeed.
being done. And a couple of other points that we need to also understand is that an additional language or essentially what is being spoken about as a unifying language, there are reasons for it. Like what we have seen, there are various symbols of unification can happen in a country. Language can also be one of the unifying factors. There are different strands, like how national symbols will unify, like how the defense armed forces unifies, like how a cricket World Cup unifies, like how an Olympic gold by Neeraj Chopra unifies. A language also unifies. I'll give you a small example. Atal Bihari Vajpayee spoke in Hindi in the UN. Why did
Mhm.
it become a proud moment for every Indian?
Yes.
Because it is in Indian language. Because and that became as a unifying factor. Even if tomorrow a prime minister comes from say Kerala or Tamil Nadu, if he speaks in Tamil or Malayalam, it will be even a Delhiite or a Punjabi will feel proud because it's an Indian language. So that is what it is. So like how a sporting achievement can unify, a prime minister speaking in Hindi in UN unified the country, and when it is being spoken or understood or known to 60 to 70% of the population, there is nothing wrong in a leader saying that can act as a unifying bond. He does not say that it is the only unifying strand. he says that can also be a unifying strand. If language is so important, is the only, say for example, people here talk about Kannada being a symbol of Karnataka, Malayalam being a symbol of Kerala, Tamil Nadu being a symbol, Tamil being a symbol of Karnataka, then what happened to Andhra and Telangana? Both languages speak the same, both states speak the same language. Why did they split? Then why are there so many Hindi speaking states? If language is the only identity that says people say in Tamil Nadu it is so highly reverential, then how can there be states speaking different languages? I mean, the same language spoken by different states. So language as a unifying factor is one of the factors. Religion can unify, language can unify, your civilization history can unify, festivals can unify. So we need to understand, or the regional politicians to need to understand that this talk of regional parochialism using language is long dead and gone. People are having access to democratic media sources so that they know the truth. Hence, they need to understand that language as a unifying bond is good for them. And Tamil Nadu, I'll also tell you this, since you both also have traveled quite a bit. And I've also been to North, and I've been to many places to do hiring for my when I was in previous roles. The option when if you want to set up an industry or if you want to set up an office, the option between Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Tamil Nadu, something that goes against Tamil Nadu is not knowing Hindi. The Tamil Nadu is anti-Hindi. This image of Tamil Nadu being anti-Hindi does stop many corporate honchos from setting up shop in Tamil Nadu. They go to Hyderabad or Bangalore. So
That's right. Yeah.
if Tamil Nadu wants to develop faster than Hyderabad, or Chennai wants to develop faster than Hyderabad or Bangalore, they should shed this image of being anti-Hindi. Because if you give an option to a North Indian student, he or she will choose Bangalore or Hyderabad compared to Chennai, because Bangalore or Hyderabad does not have that anti-Hindi image. So this migration also needs to happen.
Right.
This shedding of anti-Hindi image is very important for Tamil Nadu to attract investors from northern part, to attract students from northern India, to attract employees from northern India.
And I think the youth understands that. I mean, we
Yeah,
see people. I mean, I recently went to Srinagar and met so many people from Tamil Nadu who were driving there. I mean, on the bikes from Karnataka, from Tamil Nadu. I mean, from all over the place, all over. And somewhere they are well traveled. I think in the last 10 years, certainly people have traveled a lot, especially within India, with the development of roads, rail, flights, and I mean, those have also gone quite common. And the corporatization in the last 20 years, I think we have traveled a lot. So, I mean, at least our generation, and since
yeah.
then we know how things work in different places. And I think the youth is aware, and that's where the regional parties are a bit threatened as well with this.
That is
Uh, that,
that is the reason also to
that's a
it.
very, yeah, yeah. So they need
So
something divisive about it.
yeah, so because there is a huge difference between pre 2014 and post 2014. So
Right.
from 1989, since there has been no government that has come out its majority on its own, and regional parties had a huge say in all that. And in the law in 20 from 89 to 2014, in 25 years, both DMK and ADMK have had a huge say in say in ministries, say in government formation, taking schemes and all these things. So they had a huge role. And similarly, other parties, regional parties, let it be TMC, let it be say TDP, TRS, or any party, JDS, or any or Naveen Patnaik's BJD, or any party. So they all had a huge say because the center was dependent on regional parties. Today, the center is not dependent on regional parties, and hence they have this hatred even more towards the center or towards the BJP as a party, because they are not being uh, say they're not of value, which was their value of 2014. Today their value is not as what it was pre 2014, and
Mhm.
hence all this hullabaloo. And the second part is that they are threatened in all these states. The turf, the regional parties are threatened by the growth of BJP, because BJP has grown across the northern belt. So Bengal, they have become the opposition party. In Orissa, they are the opposition party. Congress is nowhere. In Telangana, they are the opposition party now. Congress is nowhere. TDP is nowhere. In Andhra, they are emerging as opposition to Jagan Reddy's party. In Kerala, BJP has already crossed 10% or 12% vote share. In Tamil Nadu, BJP is growing now.
In, in UP also recently we can say that BSP has been destroyed actually. There is
Yeah,
no, we
yeah.
can say.
But I'm talking about
And
non-Hindi speaking states. BJP is the emerging party today. Hence,
exactly.
regional parties have all the more reason to fear and worry, and they are waiting for
Yeah.
any opportunity to make issues and to portray BJP in bad light.
Yeah.
I can understand BJP regional parties doing it, but I don't understand why Siddaramaiah of Congress is doing that in Karnataka, because Congress, it is the Congress government till 2014, barring the Vajpayee government in middle. Congress government promoted Hindi because the constitution mandates it. Because Hindi and English are official languages. Hindi is the primary official language. English is the subsidiary language. That's what the constitution says. And hence, in 1976, Indira Gandhi set up the official language committee. In 2011, Mr. P. Chidambaram, Tamilian, was the head of the official language committee as a home minister. It had a Congress MP from Theni in Tamil Nadu, and they gave 117 recommendations to promote Hindi in internet, in government communication, in government offices, in schools, in advertisements, in name boards. You can name it. There'll be a one hour separate 1 hour session to read through those 117 recommendations. And P. Chidambaram signed it, the committee members signed it, and some of it were implemented. So Congress, when in government, when in power, promotes Hindi because the constitution says and because its history says. But then in Karnataka, Siddaramaiah is making this because it is going to be an election issue, because they're going to have elections in less than 1 year. So this is the double standard and hypocrisy of Congress and the regional parties. And DMK was very much part of the 2011 UPA arrangement when Hindi was promoted. These 117 recommendations came.
Yeah.
DMK was supporting the Congress in UPA. They never created any noise that time. Why are they creating noise now? So these are the questions that people need to ask. These are the questions that politicians need to ask, and they need to answer.
Right. So yeah, I think we can close now. It was very interesting session, and we learned a lot from you.
Thank you.
It was a very good interaction, and we hope to see you more often on our channel.
Sure.
We'll discuss a lot of stuff.
It was my pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Vivek ji.
Srinivasan ji, I love speaking with you, and again, this time we it got interrupted, but yeah, next time, I will be more prepared and will come to you, and we'll have a discussion, not a question and answer. We'll have a discussion because, yeah, really I love speaking with you, and it was a great knowledge. Answers were there and from your side, so yeah, it was very great.
Thank you. Thank you.
But anyways,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you so much.
और सभी से आग्रह है कि हम चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए और बेल का आइकन प्रेस कीजिए। हमारे साथ स्पेस भी ज्वाइन कीजिए, ट्विटर स्पेसेस पे हम अब लाइव होंगे 10 बजे, बट नॉर्मली 9:30 बजे लाइव होते हैं। तो प्लीज जॉइन अस एंड फॉर अ वेरी फ्रूटफुल डिस्कशन। थैंक यू सो मच।
Thank you.
राइट
Thank you.
जी।